Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this exciting session on the Digital Tenge. I'm very excited to be here. We have a panel of all-star experts in this space, and so I'm very excited to hear what they have to say. We're going to be covering lots of different topics, but the central theme of what we're going to be covering is something called central bank digital currencies, and CBDCs, for short, is the response by the financial world or the central bank world to cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum and stable coins. And today we're going to explore what that response looks like, okay? What are the different implications of that response, and what specifically the Digital Tenge project being conducted in Kazakhstan looks like, and what the future might look like. So I've got some great panelists here. I'm going to just go over their bios very, very quickly. To my immediate left, we have Baynur Zelenov, who is the CEO of Payment and Financial Technologies Development Center of the National Bank of Kazakhstan. And then to his left is Aynur Kenzayeva, and she is the project manager of the Digital Tenge project at Payment and Financial Technologies Development Center, also with the NBK. And then coming in from out of town, Daniel Heller is a board member of the Astana Financial Services Authority, and advisor to a company called Finality. And then from Accenture, John Velisarios, who is the global managing director, and he focuses on blockchain, multi-party systems, digital assets, custody, and CBDCs. My background, I run two companies. I'm a professor, author. I run what's called a CBDC think tank. We engage with lots of different central banks. And I run a very large blockchain community. I just came in from New York because Baynur told me so. And that's not a problem. So I want to really first start off with kind of high-level understanding of the Digital Tenge project. Like, what is this project about? And there's no better source than to go to Baynur and Aynur to have them kind of explain what does this look like. So Baynur, so what is the Digital Tenge project? Can you give us some information about this?
Yeah, for sure. We actually prepared the presentation. If organizers can show that, so we can go over the progress we did last year, where we at, and where we head into. But first off, let me appreciate all of the panelists and Jamiel for moderating the session. I think the topic is quite important because the world is changing. And the change is fundamental. The blockchain, DLT technologies, and everything is a response for a shifting consumer demand. And of course, as a central bank, we have to also adapt. And I think CBDC as a topic is interesting and important, and is able to provide a lot of opportunities to market participants. So let me start with an overview. So first off, what is CBDC? Just like a digital form of cash, it is a claim to central bank, in our case to the National Bank of Kazakhstan, so it is the third form of fiat money, obligation of the National Bank of Kazakhstan, and obviously has one-to-one exchange rate. The important stuff that it combines both cash and non-cash properties. In terms of cash properties, we can conduct theoretically offline payments in CBDC. It provides almost the same level of anonymity, and it is guaranteed by the state. From electronic money perspective or non-cash properties, you can still conduct online payments using Digital Tenge. It is in digital format. In our scenario, it is tokens. And it is as convenient as simple electronic money. But it also has a very unique features that is, I think, fit to the modern world. First off, it is obviously programmability. That what helps this money, to automate and optimize processes happening all over the world, because at the heart of any process in this world is transaction, financial transaction. And it is important to have this feature of programmability so that the monetary system can feed the demand that the business and population has. We also tested other different, features based on the programmability. For example, target use of Digital Tenge, marking the money, and many other things. I think Aynur can cover that. But why we do even care about issuing CBDC and Digital Tenge in Kazakhstan. So first off, we believe that it can become the significant part of national payment infrastructure and national payment system, just because it provides these new features of programmability and offline. Obviously, it can foster the financial inclusion in places where the internet connection is unstable, for example. We also believe that it can help to enhance the sustainability of national payment system. We'll remember what happened in January, and such an emergencies can happen. And we believe that such a solutions can make the cashless infrastructure more resilient. Of course, CBDCs in the future can be used for wholesale operations, for example, for cross-border transactions. And what is, I think, very important, it can provide a new tool for financial institutions so they can innovate and create conceptually new services because of this tokenization and programmability. So what we did last year, on May 4th last year, we published what we call a green paper, consultative report covering the conceptual stuff about Digital Tenge. After that, immediately, we launched the series of public discussions with a number of different parties, including market participants, citizens. I think it was more than 50 different meetings. But we also, in parallel, started developing what we call proof of concept platform. This is essentially like a sandbox environment where we set up the particular blockchain and started to tweak it and play with that to see how the platform might work. And the results of all that experimentation were covered in a white paper that was published on December 15th. All of the documents are available on the website of the National Bank of Kazakhstan. And of course, since it's a completely new topic, we tried to engage with our international partners, as early as possible and as much as possible. So, for example, we are members of working groups of IMF or Bank of International Settlements. We were working with World Economic Forum and obviously CBDC think tank. I think I can give the floor to Ainur to continue.
Thank you, Binur, for passing me the floor. Welcome, everyone. Let me continue our presentation with a focus on our technological part. Last year, on our pilot project, we tested different kinds of life cycle scenarios of the Digital Tenge, from emission till their distribution, which covered purchases and transfer of money. And one of the striking things here, while we tried to test all of these basic requirements, we were also able to develop some kind of unique technological solutions. Among them, we can name special purpose tokens, naming that we can put some restrictions on spending in token structure, and we also have a simplified track of its use. The second thing that we would like also to highlight is the configurable anonymity. What we mean by that? We managed to give the power on the user side that all the transaction data could be hidden from transaction participants on the user side, and only the user could decide who could see their transaction data. The third thing, it's the offline capability, that the transactions could be enabled without the access to internet. And the last but not the least, main important thing, we were also able to test the ecosystem requirements, meaning that Digital Tenge infrastructure gives a very unique opportunity for connection of external market participants, including existing second-tier banks and financial fintech companies as well. And beside of our technological things, we also did analysis in economic sphere. Here we'd like to say that, like many other central banks, we understand that there is no empirical data regarding the CBDC usage, and it's very difficult to have some kind of estimates and the typical standard economic analysis. Nevertheless, we build up some kind of theoretical model to have preliminary analysis and understand how the issuance of Digital Tenge would impact on the money supply and economy itself. It's a very simplified model. Nevertheless, it allowed us to have several conclusions, deductions, and claims that currently the National Bank has all sufficient resources to mitigate economic risks. I can just name briefly some of our conclusions. First of all, the issuance of digital tenge will correspond to proportional replacement of current account with digital cash. What does it mean? In economic theory, it implies that there will be no impact on inflation. It will only change the structure of money supply. There will be no expansion of money supply. The second thing, our analysis also shows that there is excess reserves on a banking sector that could potentially fully cover some kind of outflow from current account to digital cash. And moreover, National Bank of Kazakhstan, as a regulator, could supply all required liquidity to banking sector to cover all of this potential outflow. And also additional analysis shows that many international organizations like Bank of International Settlement, as well as other central banks, considering other additional policy tools like limits that could really also help us to mitigate and control this outflow. Just summing up what we have done so far in this area, last year we did all of our review. We analyzed all existing literatures and we gathered all the potential risks in relation to economic aspects. We built up theoretical model, but now we see it's not sufficient to go further. Therefore, what we are doing and stepping ahead is we're trying to quantify everything. And our plans for this year, I will tell in our subsequent slides. Now we can continue our presentation with Binur.
Thank you, Ainur. So let me tell you the story for this year. So the thing is that this year we want and trying to focus more on the market engagement with actual stakeholders, because our firm believe that projects like that cannot be done and written inside the cabinets and hidden stuff. So it is important to keep transparency and talk with everyone interested. So that was at the heart of our planning. But in terms of actual work, we have like different streams of work. So first is obviously related to technological expansion. So, which means that we are working on the pilot platform, and this year, by the end of the year, we would conduct actual MVP in a controlled environment with real financial institutions and real consumers to see how it works, how the non-functional requirements can roll out, and to make some decisions. So, of course, the second part would be related, as Ainur told, to economic modeling on all that smart, fancy stuff with DSG and models to try to estimate and approximate what would be the real economic impact of potential digital tenge issuance. Of course, we also would try to do the assessment of regulatory impact that should be imposed in case we launch digital tenge. And of course, at the heart of all that stuff is Digital Tenge Hub, which is a collaborative platform that wants to bring everyone interested in the game, technology providers, market participants, and our mission is to engage with them to see what is the role of CBDC for their particular business, how it can be rolled out successfully for them, to come up with a conceptual model that can provide this win-win situation. But I want to highlight that no final decision on issuance of digital tenge is made yet. We believe that it is a very important decision, so we have to take into consideration many aspects. Just this week, we would publish the paper uncovering what is a decision-making model and framework, and today will be the first day when we will publicly discuss what would be the aspects of that. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And based on that framework and all the work we're doing, we will combine all together, and by the end of this year, we would recommend decision to issue or postpone or never issue digital tenge. Ainur, please, you can go over this slide, I think. Or I can,
sure.
Whatever you want.
Thanks. Now we are turning to our plans for this year in our technological part. Here we can say that there are different stages of technology platform testing. And we have undergone the POC phase last year. This year we are going to, we are expanding our functionality for our platform. And we just wanted to say that among other countries, we are trying to work in two directions. First of all, we are trying to build up some non-functional requirements regarding our target platform vision. And the second one, we still understand that there are a lot of plenty space for R&D, naming that a lot of unanswered open-ended questions still exist. Therefore, we need to work out them in some closed environment, sandbox. Here, let me just outline and explain what we mean by that. First, this year pilot will be done in two modes. Baseline MVP will help us to answer questions regarding the non-functional requirements, as I mentioned. That includes resilience, security, throughput, this kind of stuffs. Meanwhile, our offline chain, as well as other programmability features, will be tested within the closed environment. We call it R&D sandbox. Here's some kind of a brief vision how we have designed all of these scenarios. First of all, MVP will go through basic life cycle scenarios that will cover all typical scenarios from opening wallet till the redemption. The next direction, which we called R&D sandbox, will help us to test different kind of smart contracts. And here we believe that this will be done with the help of also our market participants and different kinds of our partners and experts that will help us to figure out and understand the potentials of CBDC. Regarding the expansions of economic research, as I highlighted before, it's not sufficient for us just to have theoretical reasoning, understanding, and we have very ambitious goals for this year. We want to have quantitative assessments, and we like to have some kind of figures around the risks. We are doing this in a very planned approach. First of all, we'll conduct a survey that will help us to gather the data regarding the people's preferences, attitudes towards the different features of Digital Tenge. Based on this survey data, furthermore, we'll try to build up microeconometric model to assess the demand for Digital Tenge. And the last, in parallel, we're also developing two dynamic stochastic general equilibrium models. First this model will help us to understand how the issuance of Digital Tenge will impact on macroeconomic parameters in the economy. And the second one will help us to understand the financial stability risks. Here we like just to emphasize some novelties in our approach. We have done a lot of research in this area, and we see that many economists and central banks are doing general equilibrium models. We have decided to do DSG because the dynamic stochastic general equilibrium models allow us to integrate some country-specific features into this, and it enables us to have flexibility. And the second thing, continue. As Binur mentioned, now we are developing a decision-making framework for the Digital Tenge issuers. That paper will be published in a few days. Today is the first time we are publicly speaking about it, and we just wanted to have a high-level picture and some aspects that will be integrated into this model. First of all, it's very logical to begin with the fundamental question, whether it's worthwhile to issue, to implement and develop this new payment instrument in the economy. And our model logical will be split up into three levels. First level will answer which kind of parameters really shape and form the design of the Digital Tenge. And the second layer, where you will consider architectural design with the consideration of all its operational model, all of architectural stuff, etc. And the third level of our model will help us to test the feasibility, viability of this design.
So, I know, so just a quick question. So this is very interesting stuff.
Sure.
So we know that 90% of the central banks in the world, which represents 90% of the global GDP, are doing this kind of research. And as you know, we were involved in the white paper, the CBDC think tank was involved in the white paper When I read the white paper, I got an early draft of the white paper. It was a very impressive paper. It's probably one of the best work in the CBDC space amongst all the other banks. And if you haven't read it already, just go to the website, download it, and read it. You can see here that it's fairly comprehensive. The work that they're doing is very, very comprehensive. It's very, very technical. They're using quant models and things like that. But I just want to, maybe you can talk about the invitation to collaborate, and I want to ask some questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's fancy stuff, decision-making model we'll publish soon. So, but despite, all the complexity, just, give me 30 seconds about that. So despite all the complexity, how complex it looks like, at the very heart, it's very simple. We want to answer the questions, do we need as economy digital tenge really? So so first off, we should start with our goals. What problems we want to solve. Then once we answer that question, we understand how digital tenge should be designed. And then we should test, will this design work? Is it feasible even, to work? And in case, we answer that question systemically, compare cost and benefits, I think the question will be rolled out. And to be completely unbiased, we formed something called advisory board that consists of international experts, independent from central banks or anyone else, that would help us to make this decision and interpretation as unbiased as possible. And yeah, so we established Digital Tenge Hub. Official launch was on June 16th this year. So we have, as you might see, different categories of participants. So, but essentially anyone who is interested is welcome. We have different tracks for every category. So, for example, we can train you. You can join the design sessions, etc., etc. My colleagues can go over that in details a bit later. This QR link can help you to register. I think organizers, conveners will send the presentation later. But yeah, you might find the contacts and simply, find us in social networks to reach us. We are always open and transparent. Please join the collaboration. And the last thing I just wanted to highlight, we're trying to do like a forward-looking project now in Kazakhstan. So we are bringing up the best people and the best mind in the world to this project. But it doesn't matter anything in case our local community and local banks and local stakeholders would join the game. Our idea is not to create some fancy presentations or fancy claims. Our idea is to create a working solution, and in order to build a working solution, we inviting all of you to join the work so we can all be proud of doing this thing. So thank you.
Yeah,
sorry.
Thank you so much. Question. Ainur, so if you release the digital tenge today, and I go and I use it, and I go to the supermarket and I buy chicken, does the central bank know that I've just bought chicken? Like, what kind of privacy do I have?
Sure, yeah. Thank you for interesting question. I think it's one of the questions on top of the mind of all of our consumers today and final users. And we understood it when we began our journey last year. We know that it's one of the vital requirements to provide this privacy on the user side. And, there are a lot of solutions, technological approaches for developing and finding out this trade-off between privacy on one side and the second side, KYC requirements. And last year in our pilot phase, we developed this kind of configurable anonymity, which means that their privacy remains on the user side. What we mean by that, we have some kind of, for example, key that was split up in two. One part of this key will be on the bank side to do all of their stuff related to KYC requirements. Meanwhile, the secret key, the final key that gives power to do the transaction, validate, and store the tokens were stored on the applications of the final user. That means that all power of user remains with him in his application. This is a very one of the important things because we try to imitate cash-like properties in digital tenge. And we believe that this is one of the unique things in our pilot.
Thank you. So, Ainur, quick question. You and I love decentralized finance. also known as DeFi. I'm a big fan of DeFi. We're building DeFi stuff in New York. We have a team. You're looking at DeFi. What happens with DeFi? What happens with CBDC? Do they converge? Does one swallow the other?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we all know that DeFi is growing. Now we are observing this, correction in the markets, which I think will be first healthy for the market itself, the DeFi market, and after this correction, we would observe the steady growth. So my personal belief is that DeFi and DLT tokenization will live with us forever. So it is important now to understand as a regulator how we would address that. I don't believe that CBDC would replace, cryptocurrencies or something like that because it's just different animals. But I think they can coexist and coexist efficiently because in the end of the day, we want to solve the same problems of financial inclusion, problems of every friction that we have now in finance can be theoretically solved by two worlds. But in combination, they can provide completely new approaches to tackle old problems. In particular, I'm talking about potential programmability and interoperability between these native digital assets and CBDCs. So CBDC, for example, might be used as a collateral for privately issued stable coins, or we even discussed other crazy ideas. So my bet is that CBDC and DeFi will coexist and converge, and CBDC will be actually the first step of central banks towards legitimizing DeFi and developing the right regulatory approach and framework.
Fantastic. So let me go over to the other side of this seating before they fall asleep. You guys are awake? Let me start with you, John. You're managing director at Accenture. You see a lot of CBDC projects. There's a specific type of CBDCs that's called cross-border CBDC. Can you tell us what that is and what does the landscape look like with cross-border CBDCs? Where are we heading?
Thank you, Jamil, and thanks everyone for the invitation, for being here today. It's great to be in this session. I'd like to maybe start the answer with, I guess, a couple of things. One is, obviously, this project is referring to, obviously, from a retail perspective, Digital Tenge. And the application of CBDC spans across a number of different areas. One is retail, clearly for end users, consumers, and so on. The other one is more on the commercial or the wholesale side, where you can exchange it for large value transactions and so on. But a big area where there's a lot of friction, and what we've seen in the marketplace is cross-border. And cross-border not only on the retail side, but also on the wholesale side, where there's a huge amount of transactions that are taking place. There's a high degree of friction. There's a huge cost associated with it. But fundamentally, there's delays and counterparties that you have to deal with and so on, and a lot of intermediaries in the process. And as you may know, at the end of the day, central bank money does not move across geographic boundaries. It's only sort of obligations to pay and stuff like that. So it's really quite tricky, actually, when you look at it. We worked on a project called Project Jura, and I'll fast forward to the punchline, and I encourage you to read the report for the details of it. But Project Jura was basically a cross-border CBDC project, and it was for the very first time where we actually implemented the issuance of a digital euro to be used in another country, in another jurisdiction, for security settlement. And that project highlighted a few things. First of all, and if I sort of to answer your question in a second more comprehensively, it highlighted a few things. First of all, that it was possible to do it. It actually took us a long time to actually do it because of the regulations of different central banks, the legal regulations and so on. And it was an experiment, so it wasn't sort of a production implementation. However, what it allowed, it was for the very first time to issue a digital euro in France and to use it to settle a securities trade in Switzerland. And to do that as well the other way around. And that's the first time that's ever been done. We've actually issued a digital currency in one country and settled it in another country without any intermediary involved, without sort of any messaging system like SWIFT involved, without any other counterparty or other sort of entity involved in that whole transaction. Now, if you fast forward it and you scale this out, if you have multiple and many of those kind of relationships, you end up in a very completely different landscape from a from a sort of international finance perspective. And I think that's the potential that CBDC can enable. And I think it's very important to not lose sight of some of these big things. They are transformational. They allow things to happen that were never possible before because the technology enables it, but also because the regulation, the parties that are involved in it want it to be so. And as you can see, many central banks around the world are exploring this topic. And I think it will truly transform financial markets across the board. I think the cross-border dimension of CBDC is one of the biggest areas. And it will not only on the retail side, but on the wholesale side, create entirely new financial relationships that sort of span sort of the space and time dimension behind that.
So in terms of the relationships, like, can you give us some examples of where there would be some benefits? Right.
Well, the benefit, I think, from is really the reduction of risk from counterparties' perspective, right? So when I'm engaging in a digital exchange of a digital asset in exchange for some cash, here now, and especially when you're dealing across geographic boundaries, you now have the full backing of an entire nation that's behind this currency that's issued it, where you now no longer need a counterparty associated with that transaction. So that's entirely different now. It changes the dynamics. So the risk comes at a premium, and ultimately the buyer or seller pays for that premium. Now the cost has gone down. The risk of defaulting, Herstatt risk, counterparty risk, and default risk goes down. And I think that will change economic models and business models altogether.
Yeah, very exciting times. Really looking forward. And you're heavily involved in this stuff, and so
Indeed.
We're talking to the experts here. Speaking of experts, let me go to Daniel. Daniel, you've been in the space, in the finance space for quite a time. You're an expert. Can you walk us through what the world might look like if we actually have a bunch of countries deploy CBDCs? Let's say 15, let's say the US, China, Kazakhstan, Russia, a bunch of countries deploy their CBDCs. Does that move the needle?
It's a very interesting thought experiment, I think. And the key in kind of thinking about this scenario is that we start with access. What do I mean by that? If we look at today's world, we have central bank money for retail customers, banknotes, right? Banknotes are issued through the banking sector. So I can get a Swiss franc through my bank, right? I spend it. But then afterwards, after I spend it, the central bank loses control over where this banknote goes, right? So we know that 2/3 of US dollar banknotes are abroad. Now, if we move to retail CBDC, it's different, right? The central bank can control who has access to this digital token, right? It doesn't lose control anymore like with banknotes. So the key question is really, who can have access to a CBDC in a certain currency, right? One solution could be that every of these 15 countries says only residents can have access to this digital token. And if this is the policy, the access policy, then obviously there's no cross-border CBDC because John cannot hold the Swiss franc coin, right? And you cannot, and I cannot hold the US coin. So for a cross-border impact, we need overlapping access, right? And I think that's the key policy question that central banks will have to face. Are they willing to let a lot of foreigners hold their token? If they do, then we can think about the next developments, right? For instance, there will always be a need for FX, right? I will have to be able to buy a foreign CBDC. Who provides this service? Who is the market maker for CBDC FX transactions? We don't know yet, but this problem has to be solved, right? So it's solvable, but there is a friction, there is a cost to that, and so on. And the next question is, how much can we hold? Well, it's kind of related to access. Is it 3,000 euros, 100,000 euros? etc. And depending on where this level is, we then see an impact on the banking sector, right? Because we know that CBDC has to be funded from somewhere. I can give back my banknote, then there's no big effect, or I can use my bank deposit. Then there is an effect on banking, on how much, how big the banks are. So to answer your question, I do think we simply don't know because there are so many parameters. But if there's really widespread access with a reasonable amount that we can hold, I think there will be fundamental changes impacting the way we provide loans, the way we make payments, and so on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that. Fantastic. We have a few more minutes. I want to talk about DeFi. And John, I'll throw this question to you after I throw it to Binur. DeFi is a very large topic, right? There's prediction markets, AMMs, stablecoins, all kinds of stuff in the DeFi world. And I'm doing a lot of research in DeFi right now. I'm writing a book on DeFi for Columbia Press. Question for you, Binur, automated market makers and their interaction with CBDCs. And I think, is the DeFi paper public yet? Okay, yeah, so maybe you want to reference that and maybe tell people where they can get that paper, what that paper is about, and what your thoughts are on AMMs and interacting with CBDCs down the road. Is that possible? And then John, I'll ask you kind of the same question.
Yeah, sure. So as any other paper of our authorship, it is available on our website at payfintech.kz. We also can share that through organizer later. So what we tried to do is to provide an overview on DeFi industry from regulatory standpoint, to define what is DeFi technological stack and what are the potential frictions and how it can potentially impact the traditional financial infrastructure. We claim that interconnectedness between DeFi and traditional finances is growing, and we assume that it is the interconnectedness will grow in the nearest future, which means that we as a regulators have to make a stance and a decision on whether to regulate or how to even approach the whole DeFi stuff. But we have to realize that DeFi, by definition, cannot be regulated because it is decentralized. There is no entity to regulate. But still, I think we can approach the topic from different standpoints. For example, to regulate cryptofied gatekeepers, or to control these liquidity runs, etc., etc., etc. So and the idea is that we don't know how to regulate, and we don't know whether we should regulate even. So we throwing out this question to open public. Soon we will announce a number of meetups. And discuss with the public what is the best way for Kazakhstan. Because as Kazakhstani jurisdiction, we want to become an innovation-friendly regulator so that the brightest minds from all over the world can join and scale here in Kazakhstan. In terms of AMMs, etc., so there are a number of views on that. So on one side of the spectrum, it's a sort of traditional central banking approach to that, because AMMs and all the stuff, they, effectively speaking, can serve as an automated central bank or a decentralized central bank, but in DeFi space with completely different nature, but in terms of mechanics and technology, it works in some way, which might work. I don't know whether CBDC can be used in these AMMs now, but it definitely will be a good experiment to do so and to look what would happen with all the economy behind these CBDC, because it would impact the supply and demand and all the stuff. But this risk-free feature of CBDC in these AMMs obviously can bring a lot of value to the whole DeFi space. And so being freed from this risk, I think that in case of a thought experiment, when we put CBDC in these AMMs or somewhere else, I think it will definitely provide more sustainability in that markets. But there are a bunch of regulatory and legal issues with that, a bunch of issues related to this, liquidity management overall and macro liquidity management. So I don't know, but I think that in the future, CBDC can serve as a bridge sustainable bridge between traditional financial infrastructure and DeFi, and probably AMM can serve as a bridge from DeFi space. And that's how it might potentially converge in the future.
Right. As, for example, there's an AMM called Curve, Curve Finance. That's a stablecoin swap. You can swap stablecoins, and you might ask, well, why would I want to swap stablecoins? But there is a demand. There's a very active market in these AMMs and these automated market makers to swap from one stablecoin, let's say USDC, to let's say Tether. John, so DeFi AMMs, is there a play with cross-border? And what are your thoughts on CBDCs and AMMs?
Yeah, so I concur with Binor's comments around sort of the ability to use CBDC to reduce some of the risk associated with some of these transactions. I think it will have a positive effect overall. Because obviously you're now dealing with a part of the equation of the transaction that is more that has a sort of a backing of a central bank and ultimately sort of the state behind it. I think that if I sort of roll back the clock and I look at sort of or the calendar, and I look back at sort of what we've been seeing over the last couple of years, the whole DeFi space has grown exponentially. I think there's a significant amount of growth in this area. There's a lot of interest in the marketplace, and our clients, who are regulated financial institutions, are actually engaging in this market, right? And not in every geography, but they are engaging in these markets, and they're enabling this kind of sort of services for their clients. And we were a little bit surprised at how quickly that happened, actually, simply because we thought it would take a little bit more time around that, but they're really aggressively pushing sort of the envelope with regards to sort of providing some of these services to the wider marketplace. I think that at the end of the day, what we'll end up seeing is sort of a convergence of these areas, with more sort of discipline and rigor in sort of the whole DeFi space. Coupled with sort of additional mechanisms like CBDC to enable the settlement side of it, make it more sort of stable, I guess, in many respects. And I think that'll create sort of the right sort of framework and the right sort of momentum for a more mature sort of marketplace for everyone. And I think that's sort of where it's going to go, I believe. And I think that'll continue to drive innovation and move forward in that area.
Fantastic. So we're running out of time. Quick 30 seconds. I want to walk down this row. What does the financial markets look like in 20 years? And don't say, I don't know. It's not an excuse. We'll start with Binur. It could be globally or in Kazakhstan. You choose.
Yeah, so my bet would be it would be more tokenized than now. And tokenization, broadly speaking, will be a key enabler of future
Would it be the norm?
Yeah, would be the norm, and yeah, would be used everywhere. So that's what I believe.
Ainur. Also, Ainur, do you have any cryptos? Are you holding?
I don't use crypto. I shared the Binur's vision regarding the future of financial market, and one of the things that I really believe and hopes that Digital Tenge will exist, and our consumers and final users will have all the potential benefits of this new CBDC.
So you're saying more inclusion. Yeah, thank you. John?
We have a point of view around the global token economy. So absolutely digital assets, digital currencies, holding tokens in a digital
A
format.
blockchain is a default?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we have a view
exciting.
about that, and it's coming maybe faster than 20 years, actually.
Yeah.
But I think in 20 years' time, we'll definitely get to that sort of space. And I think that people will hold their digital money, their wealth, their transactions, and so on in a digital format, and it'll be in the token format.
Very exciting. Daniel?
Yeah, financial assets will be tokenized. I think CBDC will play a big role, but also the companies that will dominate the market have not been founded yet. We don't know them, but we will know in 20 years.
So there's a massive amount of disruption, clearly, yeah. Okay, we're running out of time. So I'm getting orders on my earpiece here. First of all, if you haven't gone to the website, payfintech.kz, you can sign up to join, I think, the Digital Tenge Hub there. So please go to the website, sign up. There's an Instagram page. There's a lot of content there. So if you want to get engaged with this community, and it's rapidly growing. And Binur, after this talk, you should go up and talk to him. He's a visionary. There's very few people like Binur doing what he's doing in the central bank space. So get plugged into the community, and if you have something to contribute, please get involved. So payfintech.kz. I want to thank the organizers, the Payment and Financial Technologies Development Center of the National Bank of Kazakhstan, and the Astana International Finance Center, along with the AIFC Tech Hub, for providing us this space and the time to be with you guys. Thank you very much.